Hey, everybody, this is Holly from Holly's Pandorium, and I have back with me today, yay, it's been months. This is my friend Jay Cobb, and he's going to give us some Sasquatch updates that I've been really looking forward to. So get out your popcorn feed bag, get your blankie, and get comfortable. We got some fun stuff to share. I can't wait to hear this. So, Jay, you've been doing a lot of Sasquatch stuff, huh?
Yeah, you've kind of made me a foreign correspondent for you. And when I was
Mhm.
down in California, I don't know that I can call myself that anymore since I've moved to Washington and now I'm a local. Uh,
Right.
so, but yeah, you've kind of tasked me with a few things, and unknowingly, I think I mentioned it before in one of ours. I have plopped myself right in the middle of Bigfoot Central.
Right.
And the more I learn about living here in Bigfoot, I am just amazed. I'm gobsmacked. And God works in mysterious ways because I went to the Sasquatch Summit, which is literally 7 miles down the road from me.
Yeah.
And while I was there, I really didn't buy anything. I bought a couple of books, which I'm going to show you later. But it was pretty cool. They have these are your little day passes here. How do I do that?
Oh,
Little
cute.
Bigfoot, summit passes.
It's a
And
foot. I
then,
love it.
yeah. And then, we have I got my Sasquatch passport uh, for the event and stuff.
Cool.
So it's kind of neat. But just a couple of days ago, okay, you and I had scheduled this meeting about
Uh-huh.
getting all this Bigfoot stuff off my plate. And I went to the Razor Clam Festival that was here in town. And I was flirting with the girls from the casino, which is where the Bigfoot Festival was held.
Yeah.
And they said, "Hey, do you want a Bigfoot shirt?" And I said, "Girl, you don't have my size. I'm a 5X, okay? You ain't got my size." He
Uh-huh.
goes, "Yes, we do." So
Oh my gosh.
look at that.
Wow.
Get
Cool.
that.
That's incredible.
So, like I
Wow.
say, God works in mysterious
Well,
ways.
that's amazing. How nice that they did that for you. That's great.
Yeah, yeah. So it was just like perfect. They gave me a shirt, it fit, and we're doing the Bigfoot thing.
Perfect.
And so it was just like, well, thank you, Lord, appreciate it. You know,
Kismet.
yeah. So anyway, I got a lot on my plate here to get off. And
Okay.
we're going to break it down into two sections. I'm going to go part one and part two. Part one is going to be the SAS chats that they hold every month here
Okay.
in Ocean Shores at the local library. And so we got 5 months to go through. And basically, I'm just going to go through the sightings that were reported at
Okay.
the meetings.
Okay.
This is about all the time we got to. So since I think October was our last one that you and I had talked about. So
Hmm.
I'm going just from December. So this
Okay.
is basically 3 months worth, and I've got 6 reported sightings locally. The
Wow.
first one was on December 4th, daylight sighting. And this was right near Lytle's Oysters on Highway 109. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Ocean Shores is at the end of the world. We're a little slim peninsula right on the coast.
Right.
And our nearest town-ish, good-sized city, is Hoquiam. And Highway 9 connects the two, and it runs right across the top of the bay. And about halfway point on Highway 109 is a little oyster place called Lytle's. And it is a hot spot for people seeing daylight crossings of Bigfoot crossing the road. We'll get to that a little bit later. But anyway, at Lytle's, there was a daylight sighting where Bigfoot just walked right across on the highway. And then there was a second sighting 10 miles north of us, so just north of Ocean Shores, about 10 miles, about halfway between us and Forks, I guess. There was another daylight sighting, just a Bigfoot crossing the road. And third one, there was a third sighting And this was at Lytle's. Right across from Lytle's, there's a big horse pasture. And this was early in the morning. Guy's going into Hoquiam or Aberdeen, and he sees a Bigfoot standing in the pasture with the horses, and the horses are going over to him. And he's like, is that really, you know, rubbing his eyes and stuff, is that a Bigfoot? And the horses are actually going over to him. And so that was his. And now this is just amazing.
Wow.
And then there was a number 4 is a daylight sighting crossing Highway 109 just past Lytle. He said it was about maybe a quarter mile up the road towards Ocean Shores side, past Lytle's. And he said it came from the right, crossed the highway, went up the ridge, and stopped at the top of the ridge, turned, looked at him as he's driving by, and bared his teeth, and then went over the ridge.
Oh, no.
It's like, damn it, he saw me. You know, I don't know. But
wow.
He actually stopped at the top of the ridge, looked at him, and then bore his teeth at him. So that was, that would catch my attention. Mm-hmm. Another early morning sighting just past the casino, which is about 7 miles out of town. But and then right next to the casino is like a national park type thing. And so right about there, it was actually a speaker that was coming to Ocean Shores to speak at the SAS chat. Him and his partner were on their way into town, and he saw a Bigfoot on the right-hand side of the road. And he says to his partner, "Hey, did you see that? There's one right there." And he says, "No," he says, "I didn't see it." It was still, kind of dark out. It was about, 6:30 in the morning or something like that. They came into town. They went to McDonald's. They got their little McMuffins. And he says, "Hey, I'm going to go back and see if I can see that thing again." And so they both went back, and they both saw him.
Wow.
And that was, talk about kismet. I mean, here they are coming to Ocean Shores to talk about their Bigfoot experiences. And they see one on the way in, they go back and they see it again. So that was pretty amazing. And then the last one that I have is, again, Highway 109. It was near the Grass Creek Bridge. And it was a simple sighting of moving from tree to tree. There's a break in the trees. And he saw just a simple moving from tree to tree. So anyway, those are just the ones that are local to me that have been reported in just the last 3 months, which when I arrived here surprised me at the number of Bigfoot sightings in this area, because it's a fairly populated area. I mean, we're not up in the woods like, everybody, talks about, being up in the mountains and stuff. I mean, we're down at sea level, we're at the beach. And so it always kind of surprised me why we have so many sightings. And as we get into it a little bit later, when we talk about Scott Taylor, this is a very known thing around here, and I'm surprised it isn't more well known. But anyway, I also have some fun facts. So these are Washington Bigfoot fun facts. Okay. So the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, we're going to talk about them a little bit in here. It's called the BFRO. Mm-hmm. So if you have a Bigfoot sighting anywhere, you can call the BFRO and report it. And, if it sounds like it's a credible thing, they might send an investigator out. And, they're basically a reporting and tracking, just like MUFON or something like that. Okay. So these are some of their facts. The BFRO has 717 sightings, and that's just for Washington. That's just for this state. 353 of them, about half of those, all occur in just 5 counties in Washington. The Army Corps of Engineers, their environmental atlas that was published in 1975, they actually acknowledged Bigfoot in a government report. And then once people saw that, it quickly got pulled, and they never made any more.
Oh. That's funny.
But if you can ever find in a library or on eBay or something, the Army Corps of Engineers Environmental Atlas for Washington, published 1975.
Wow.
There's a section in there on Bigfoot acknowledging.
So can I stop you just for a quick second?
Sure.
So can you tell me, do you know these 717 sightings from the BFRO? How long is this from? What's the time range? When did they start recording these sightings?
That I don't know. I had talked with Scott Taylor, and I know that he's been involved with them since 2006.
Okay.
So that's 20 years plus,
Right.
I'm sure. But I do not know when they started. Like I said, you can probably go onto their website.
Look that up. Yeah.
And you can pick by state. All over the country. You want to know how many Bigfoot sightings are in Pennsylvania?
Right. Interesting.
That's reported that they got them. So anyway, but anyway, so moving on. Another fun fact: this year, 2025, there's going to be a bill to create a Bigfoot specialty license plate. So you can actually order a personalized specialty plate
Nice.
for Bigfoot.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so Washington's actually going to have a bill come up this year to create a new specialty plate. Here was something I found interesting. Fort Lewis, the Army base up here, has a Bigfoot protocol in case they have any base encounters.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, so the military base, and Fort Lewis is a big base.
Yes.
In fact, we just had some big old helicopters doing exercises, flying up and down, buzzing our beach just a couple days ago. But the training missions, but they actually do have a protocol in case there's an encounter. Also, there's a movie coming out. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but it's going to be about, are you familiar with the Ape Canyon Fred Beck incident from 1924?
I feel like I have heard of it, but I'm not remembering details. But it does sound familiar.
Yeah, back in 1924, a couple of hunters were in that, it's called Ape Canyon now because of this encounter. They called it Ape Canyon, where I guess they pissed off a group of Bigfoot, and then they went scared, running back to their little cabin, their little hunter's cabin. And then that night, they got attacked by a troop of Bigfoot, throwing stones, boulders, and at the cabin, and broke a door, and they were, it was a famous encounter. Anyway, it was called Ape Canyon now because of that encounter. It was in the papers back then and all that stuff. Right. And there's supposed to be a movie about it coming out, so there might be a little bit of a Bigfoot movie coming here shortly. So anyway, that's part one. I just wanted to get that out there. Okay. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the Sasquatch convention. Like I said, I was there for the 3 days. I paid for the 3 days. And they give you a little pass so that you can, get in and out and that sort of thing. And then the passport is basically your guide. It tells you who's going to be speaking, and all the credentials for, the speakers and who they are, and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. Okay, here we go. Part two, here we go. First day was meeting. It was kind of like a meet and greet. It was started, I think, about 6 o'clock in the evening. And they had Tom Powell, I guess, has been a long time OG Bigfoot researcher.
Okay.
I'm new to this stuff, so I didn't really know who he was. But there was a video about his experiences and findings and his thoughts. Do you know who David Paulides is? Paulides? David
It's not
Paulides?
ringing a bell, but I'm terrible with
Okay.
names. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, he's written, I don't know, 15 different books on stuff. He's most famous for Missing 411.
Okay.
He is a former National Parks police investigator.
Okay.
And he's been on radio, coast to coast shows and stuff all the time about people who go to national parks and mysteriously turn up missing. No,
Okay.
I'm not talking about people breaking their legs and getting lost in the forest and stuff. I
Right.
mean, mysteriously disappear, unknown circumstances, and circumstances that
Don't make sense necessarily.
they don't make sense. Like
Okay.
people are missing. They've got 300 people looking for them, and they show up 2 days later in a place that's been searched 6, 7, 8 times. There's no way you could have missed them.
Okay.
I've worked with police dogs and stuff like that, and they talk about these tracker dogs, cadaver dogs, bloodhounds, and they can't pick up a scent.
That's incredible.
That's impossible. It's impossible. I mean, these dogs can pick up a scent that are 2 and 3 days old.
Yeah.
And they can pick up scents. And if it's bad weather, and surprisingly, one of the common denominators is bad weather,
Right.
it's even better for the dogs because of the moisture holds the scent and it amplifies it.
Interesting.
And that's why dogs have wet noses. It's to amplify, the scents and things like that.
Wow.
Common denominators between the people that go missing. A lot of them happen to be very, very intelligent.
Right.
Some of them have handicaps. It's amazing. But anyway, it didn't have a lot to do with Bigfoot, but it was amazing. And I had heard of him, and that's why I actually bought the book. Because I wanted to.
That's fair, because there's been a lot in the news about mysterious disappearances in national parks for all different reasons.
Right.
I follow some groups that actually keep track of and broadcast things for missing Native American women that are in all different places, Alaska and the United States, all over different states where this keeps happening.
Right.
And so it is a very interesting subject. So that's got to be a great book. So have you read the book yet? Or are you still getting through it?
I have read the book. It gets a little tedious because he goes by like chronological order.
Oh, okay.
So, the first one, I don't know what year it starts, but it's a chronological order from oldest to newest. And this particular book is specific to Washington. So this is the Washington State series, but he has books for California, Oregon, Idaho, all Western states.
That's really incredible.
Yeah. So it's focused directly on your particular state. I mean, I think he's got like a big book of Missing 411 that has like all of them or whatever. But it was fascinating.
So I got to ask Jay, does he make any indication if what he thinks the cause is? Does he talk about alien abduction, or what does he think is the reason behind all these missing people situations?
Well, here's the thing. David Paulides is an investigator. He's working from the law enforcement side.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't make any conclusions. He is simply gathering facts. Okay. These are the facts. He does not make any conclusions. And Jeff Meldrum, who I'm going to talk about later, he's the same way. He will gather and he'll speak about the facts and things that are known, things that can be proven, things that actually happened, but he will not, and David Paulides is the same way. They will not speculate as to what it means. And it actually pisses off a lot of the community. I was really surprised to see that there's some conflict, hated rivalries between Bigfoot researchers and organizations because they won't actually say, yes, Bigfoot is real. They'll say, hey, here's the evidence, but they won't say, if you pin them down and say, is Bigfoot real? They won't say it. And Pallades is the same way. It may indicate UFO, it may indicate Bigfoot, but he'll never say it. So that's just,
that's
the
interesting, though.
Cop attitude in the investigator and the scientist when referring to Meldrum. So those guys are a little bit on the outs with a lot of these people because they won't nail it down.
Well, as some other Bigfoot experiencers and investigators have shared with me, you can have all the evidence in the world, but if you don't have proof,
right,
it's not enough. Footprints are not enough. Hairs are not enough.
Right.
And it seems illogical to me when there's so many sightings. And even if I wasn't an experiencer, the fact that so many people are,
right,
so many people have seen the same thing. Are they all crazy? I mean, when I had my experience, I was a 12-year-old girl who'd never heard of anything like that in the woods, never been introduced to that idea. My parents were very selective about what I was allowed to watch and hear on TV and the news and radio. So it was completely out of my spectrum of experience. I had no idea what I was looking at. And so I know that I'm not alone in that. There's plenty of people that have seen a form of Sasquatch or Bigfoot that have never heard of it before. And so now, years later, when more people are talking about it, it seems unlikely to me that it's made up in any way. It seems more likely that there is some explanation that's rational, even though it may not seem plausible. Maybe they are around and maybe they are better at hiding than we would like to admit. We like to think that we're the top species and that we have everything figured out. And I don't think we do. I think there's a lot we don't know. And
well,
I
they
think
are the hide and seek champions. So
they win. They totally win hide and seek.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I agree 100%. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of like day one. That was day one. That was from like 6 to 8 or 6 to 9. And of course, they had all the vendors there and stuff like that.
Sure.
But that was just kind of an introduction. And then after that, they went to witness testimony. So they kind of opened up the microphones for anybody that wanted to come up and just get off their chest their experiences, and then let everybody know what happened to them. And so that was day one. Day two, I got the time wrong. I thought it started at 8 in the morning, but apparently it started at 9. So I had an hour to kill at the casino. And I was hanging out in this kind of, looked like a sports betting type area, tables and chairs and TVs. And, I was watching the, college football games that were coming on that day. And this guy sat down and was having his breakfast. And I was, just started up a conversation with him and said, hey, you here for the Bigfoot conference? And he said, oh, yeah. He says, I'm a presenter. And I said, oh, yeah. I says, well, do you mind if I sit and talk with you? And so I sat down at the table and introduced myself. And he said, yeah, my name's Scott Taylor. And I was like, meant nothing to me at the time.
Right.
Except that I knew that his name was in my passport. And I was like,
okay.
Oh, yeah, you are a presenter with BFRO, right? And he said, yeah. And so I kind of explained that, before I moved here or after I moved here, I don't remember when, I actually went on the website, looked up the incidents that were reported for my area and was stunned, shocked, and amazed at how many of them there were. And he said, oh, yeah. He says, Bigfoot winter's here. And I was like, what? And he says, yeah. He says, in the wintertime, they come down out of the mountains and they hang out down here on the coast. And he was saying that Ocean Shore specifically, from Sand Dune Boulevard, which is like the north-south road, but from between there and the actual ocean, they call it Bigfoot Highway. He says, yeah,
Really?
they're up and down there all the time. He says they go to the bay side. They like to forage for food on the bay side. I don't know if I've mentioned it to you before, but there are deer everywhere here. I
Yeah.
mean, we call them long-legged rats because they're just everywhere,
Okay.
and they are so desensitized to people. I mean, you can feed them by hand if you want to.
I bet.
It's illegal to do it. There's an ordinance. You don't feed the deer around here, but man, let me tell you, a lot of people do. I see it happen a lot.
I get it.
I was talking about all these sightings that they keep seeing across 109, and he says, "Oh yeah," he says it's like it's like a route. It's like a paper route they do. They come down ocean shores along the beach, round the point. They forage up the bay side, and then come morning, then they cross over the highway and go back to the woods. Uh, and I was like, this is a city. There's people here. I don't understand.
Right.
And he's like, well, yeah, but in the wintertime, all the tourists are gone. In the wintertime, all the old snowbirds, about half of the population here is all people over 60, 70 years old. So, when the weather turns bad in October, November, they all head off to Arizona or whatever. So the population is halved again. And he says, there's not too many, chuckleheads like me who stay here all winter. And so he says, oh, yeah, and it's a well-known thing.
Wow.
And that just stunned, shocked, and amazed me that Bigfoot hangs out in ocean shores.
Well, it's not just that. It's the idea that the information that they have on migration is so past beyond. How do we know that? Well, if there's all this evidence and all these sightings, clearly there's a pattern. I mean, you can't ignore that. Just like watching what birds do.
Right.
If you follow the birds, you see what after a period of time, you notice they keep doing the same things over and over again. But it's interesting, why that area? What is it about there? And you'd made a comment to me about was it clamming? That they come to is it clamming?
They come down here and forage for clams and mussels and oysters just like we do.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And I suspect that's a lot why they see so many sightings around Lytle's, because that's what they do is they're an oyster farm.
Gotcha.
So they're probably down there, licking shells or whatever the hell they're doing, or raiding their oyster beds.
Right.
I don't know. I
love it.
But that's
great.
That's what they do is they're an oyster company, and they're seen there all the time. Seems like.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Scott, he's a researcher since 2006 with the BFRO. He's taken 220 reports in that time. He's had 7 personal sightings himself, and he's been a participant in 56 different Bigfoot expeditions. So he's a guy that carries some weight. I'm actually going to talk to him the next time I see him. He's actually attended some of these Sasquatches here. I don't know where he lives, but he's fairly local. I'm going to see if I can't get him to come talk to you with me on one of these podcasts in the future.
That'd be great.
And see what he says about that. So anyway, he did his presentation, and then after him was Eli Watson. I don't know if that's a name familiar to people. He produced a video and showed it. It's called Bigfoot Road to Discovery, and it was very, very informative. I'm just going to kind of rip through this. If you guys want to, investigate these people or look it up, a lot of these videos are on YouTube. I'll get with Holly later, I guess, and maybe we can
I can try and add it in the comments so that people can look things up.
Yeah.
So they can, and if I can, I'll add links to that so people can find it.
And I've got like a reading list too, because they gave a lot of good reading. Because one of the questions was asked is, hey, there are thousands of Bigfoot, books and stuff. What are some of the legitimate, books that we should be looking at? And, And there was a like a reading list that was given and said, these are viable books, and you should
Nice.
start with these. So I'll
Okay.
refer to you that offline on that.
That'd be great.
Yeah. And Eli Watson is from the Olympic project. Here we go. Here's another prop.
Okay. Is that
There
a
we go.
sticker?
This is a sticker.
Okay.
Which way we go? I
No, I got it. Yeah, it's great.
Olympic project, Bigfoot research.
Okay.
So there was a couple of speakers from them. I actually got another sticker here. I don't know if.
Okay. Research with a purpose. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So these guys were there. And they had a really, really good presentation upon nests. What happened is there was a logging company surveyor, and he stumbled across a bunch of what he thought was Bigfoot nests, and he invited them out to investigate. And this investigation went on for about 2 years because they kept stumbling upon these abandoned Bigfoot nests. And what made it very interesting is that they were all built the exact same way. And, they looked like giant birds' nests. They were about 1 to 2 feet thick, the nests themselves, all made from huckleberry boughs that were snapped off or pulled off. There was no cut marks on any of the huckleberry boughs. Huh. They were stuck in the ground and then bent over to form the nest. Unlike like a gorilla, they'll just pull things down and then flatten them out and lay them down. But these were actually removed, stuck in the ground vertically, and then bent over so that you had these nice rounded edges, like a bird's nest.
Right.
And they were anywhere between 8 and 10 feet wide. And they laid them and stuff, and they said, yeah, they are quite comfortable. What else? DNA. A lot of people talk about, you can't prove, Bigfoot until, you DNA proof or whatever.
Right, right.
Well, it's not real well known, but there has been several DNA and eDNA. You know what that is? Environmental DNA.
Oh, I don't know. Okay.
Where they can, they're advanced to the point now where you can take water samples or, leaves or branches.
Okay, I have heard of that. Yes. Or like the dirt, there's certain types of dirt and rocks that only have certain elements from certain areas of the world. Right.
Yeah. Okay. But if you touch it, you leave DNA. And eDNA is to the point now where they can actually, if you take samples from like a Bigfoot footprint and stuff, and you can analyze it and get results. And there's also been tissue and hair samples that have been done. And most of the time they'll come out inconclusive. Okay. But they have got positive results. And the DNA, mitochondrial DNA that they've been able to process show that it is human on the mother's side and the father's side is unknown. It is not in any database for any living creature. So that's there incredible. You go.
Right.
So there is DNA results that are showing half human, half unknown, not ape, not human, not anything known in any database.
Now, I don't know. I'm going to interrupt for just a second. I don't know if I ever shared this with you or not, but I have a friend that used to live at the edge of Yosemite, and he loved to go hiking. Him and his wife hiked all the time. And he called me one afternoon and he was just beside himself. And he said, Holly, you are not going to believe what I just saw. He was out hiking and he saw a blonde female Bigfoot that he swore had to be a teenager. It was very small. And he said, by contrast from what, they were described as in his understanding. So he said she was about 6 foot tall. She wasn't very tall, but very slender, like a teenager, like a smaller, smaller bone, smaller frame. But he said covered in hair, a blonde hair. And he said, but there was something about her face that looked distinctly more human than animal to him. And he said, she stared at him. He goes, she stared at me as long as I stared at her. And he said, she didn't seem afraid of me. And he said, but I was just fascinated, how long her arms were and her feet and legs were so long. And he said, she looked partly human. And he said, I couldn't get over that. And he said, I was stunned. And he goes, I know I was in shock for part of it because I just froze. And he said, I stared at her for the longest time. And he said, he could not get the image out of his mind. He said, because there was something so familiar about her face that she seemed so human to him. And it made him wonder about stories he'd heard about crossbreeding, Bigfoot's having babies with human females. And he goes, if I didn't know better, I would have swore that's what I was looking at. He was just about positive. And he said, she wasn't a towering animal. She was a more frail looking female, slender. He said her hips, her legs, everything about her was more like a regular human woman, except her being covered in hair. And she had broader shoulders, she had bigger shoulders. And he said, and to look at her arms, he goes, her arms were at her sides. And he said, they were so long. He goes, they weren't like human arms. They were much longer. But it just blew his mind. And he said she was just walking around like he was, just basically taking a hike in the woods. And he said he never saw her again. He only saw her the one time. And he said, but he goes, that changed my life. He goes, I can't stop thinking about that. How did she get there? Where was she? And how did she just suddenly walk up to an area where he goes, it was like she just appeared.
Right.
And he said, I'd been walking. He goes, I didn't hear any footsteps. I didn't hear any noise. There was no knocking. There was none of the traditional things that you would expect to kind of warn you that you're in a Bigfoot area. And he said, so he was really puzzled because everybody in Yosemite has either had a story with a Bigfoot experience or they've know of someone who has. There's that many. There's so many in Yosemite. And so he was really blown away by the whole thing.
We'll get into a little bit of the woo stuff like a little bit later on, but that doesn't surprise me a bit.
Right.
And because there's been Bigfoot reports on all spectrum of hair color.
Yeah.
Just like people. I mean, from jet black to brown to
red,
gray and red.
Yes.
And white.
Yeah.
So yeah, that doesn't surprise me a bit. Also, because of the coloring of the hair, maybe it was like the rest of us. It just, it was a frail old lady that had turned gray, and
it could be. I don't know.
Who knows?
Right.
But that doesn't surprise me a bit. So,
right.
But anyway, and they had some casts and stuff. And I tell you, what amazed me the most was the baby ones. They had baby footprints that were.
Did they?
Baby. I mean, the smallest one I saw was probably about maybe 5 inches, 6 inches.
Really?
Like infant size. I mean, but a little bit bigger. And then little handprints. They had just like a little tiny handprint.
Really?
Yeah, it was amazing. Wow. And so that was their presentation with Eli Watts. And I'm going to kind of go on down here. Okay. David Pallades, the guy from Missing 411, he also does some Bigfoot investigation and stuff, and he has books out about his 2 years investigating with the Hoopa Reservation, Native American folks. And the Hoopa and a lot of Native American tribes, when you get them to talk, they refer to Bigfoot as people.
Yeah.
They don't refer to them as animals. They
Correct.
refer to them as human beings,
Right.
and they treat them as if they are another tribe.
Yeah.
And that's almost universal.
Yeah.
Some will, say star people or whatever. They say they came from the sky. That's kind of on the woo 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 side.
Right.
But most of your Native American, and like you said earlier, when you have reports and you have stories and you have this vast number over centuries that have been passed down, there's got to be something to it. And like I say, they treat them just as if they are another tribe because they
Right.
consider them human beings and not animals.
Right.
So that's David Pallades. Like I said, I'm just going to brush over some of this stuff.
Okay.
Next up was Stan Gordon, Gordon. Gordon. He's a Pennsylvania UFO and Bigfoot investigator. Now we're going to get into some of the woo-woo stuff.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. So he was talking about how tracks either start or stop in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
Like on snowy trails.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be going across a meadow and they'll be tracking these tracks. These are fresh tracks, right?
Yeah. Yep.
They started like nowhere and they'll follow these tracks and they'll go over, a meadow rise or something like that. And halfway up the rise, nothing. Disappear completely, completely clear in every direction. There's where did it go? Where did it go? How did it go? It's stuff like that. Just amazingly, that no possible way for this thing. And fresh. I mean, they're hot on the trail.
So I have one I can share with you from last year. So one of my adopted kids lives in Alaska. He's half native. And just last year, I got a text from him at like 11 or 12 at midnight. Mom, you will not believe. And he tells me he got off work and he and one of his cousins were just outside working on an old vehicle that he had an old Jeep pickup he was working on. And his cousin noticed these tracks and they went, oh man, that's a Sasquatch. And so they followed these tracks for almost 2 hours. And then they just stopped.
Yeah.
And it was in an open area. There was not a bunch of trees really close by or anything. It was just an open area. Mm-hmm. It hadn't snowed. It hadn't rained. They just disappeared. There was nothing. Yep. And he said it drove them crazy. They walked around in circles and looked to see if it had hopped or something. But he said it was the weirdest thing. And this was just last year. And he said he could not believe how big they were. It was one set of prints, but it was clearly this thing had a giant stride. He goes, they were 7 feet apart. Oh. These strides. This was a huge stride. And so it was unmistakable. This repeated pattern. And then nothing. So it's not like somebody was playing with footprints, wearing big boots or something and trying to prank, because there was nothing else around.
Right.
There was no other.
Yeah, it's not like you could reach out and grab a limb of a tree or,
There was nothing. Yeah, it was in a big open area. And, Alaska has big, wide open spaces.
Oh, yeah, there's lots of tundra. Yeah.
So that was kind of strange. Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, not uncommon. Not uncommon.
Right.
Like I said, they report this stuff all the time.
Everywhere.
The other thing that I keep hearing repeatedly is that when they're seen running, they don't seem to run like you and I. And there's a specific word I keep hearing all the time, and that's gliding. He says they look like they're gliding. He says, they're running, but he says, well, not he, but I keep hearing this. I must have heard it 10, 15 times already, is that when they're moving quickly, they glide. And that's the word that they use over and over and over again, which kind of surprises me. I'm still having a little hard time wrapping that one around my head.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture that, and it's almost like I'm picturing skating in my mind.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm picturing too. But that is the word that I keep hearing is that when they're moving quickly, they seem to. It's so smooth, it looks like they're gliding. Is how they mention it. The other thing they were talking about is they've done some investigations up in Alaska, like you were saying, and it's very common for the natives and the fishermen and boaters to see them swimming. And the reason that is interesting is that if they are a great ape, lots of these scientists and stuff are saying Bigfoot is no more than maybe a remnant of Gigantopithecus,
right?
A great ape. Well, Gigantopithecus, scientists know literally almost nothing about this creature other than that they found 3 molars in a cave in China. So everything that they talk about Gigantopithecus is hypothesis.
Correct.
But what makes it interesting is that great apes don't swim. So the fact that they've actually seen Bigfoot swimming puts him more on to the human side of the scale.
Correct.
Which is one of the things that I took away. Now, here's something that Stan Gordon was talking about that fascinated me. You've heard of Skinwalker Ranch by now, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
TV show about it and stuff, and all the weird things that happen over there.
Yeah. Yes, there's a lot.
Well, I haven't seen. I've seen some episodes, but it's not something on my watch list or whatever. And I don't know if they've ever touched on this in their show. But he was on an investigation at the Skinwalker Ranch where they were using both FLIR, forward-looking infrared, and night vision infrared cameras. And they had an experience where they sighted a Bigfoot-like creature exiting from a, quote, I'm quoting here, a light tunnel and running away. So this is something that they saw with their own eyes, with their IR and FLIR equipment capturing.
Right.
They reviewed the video, and there was nothing on the video.
I love that. I love that.
Completely scrubbed.
It's incredible. And I have to interject really fast. So one of the programs I watched recently that made a lot of things that make you go So there was conversation about in this video I watched about our unnatural bodies for this planet. We sunburn, we have all these ailments we can get, and we're not technically, we are missing some key components to surviving this planet naturally. We need shelter. Right. We need this and that, and just to function.
Why don't we have hair?
Right. And so what part of the conversation in this thing I watched was, but if you look at a Sasquatch, they're perfectly adept for this planet. They're covered in hair. They have stronger bodies. Everything about the way they exist is made for this planet's climates. They can exist in all different weather. They swim, they fish, they hunt. They do all these things that allow them to eat. They eat berries. There's all these things. They ingest the natural flora and fauna around. And so what are we doing here by contrast? Right. And so it was presented that, they're the natives, we're not.
Right.
And I thought, oh my gosh.
One of the other guys, Eli Watson, when he was talking about the huckleberry nest and stuff like that, like I said, this was a two-year investigation, I think. Mm-hmm. And what they found is like we were talking, how they have a migration, which, surprised me or whatever.
Yeah.
But as they found these nests, what they were finding was a pattern. and he said that these pattern of they found 5 ridges. Okay, so this is a mountain, right? And they had 5 ridges, 1, 2, 3, 4, ridges. And all these nests were found on the western facing edge of these fingers on this ridge.
Okay.
So all these nests were on the western side, and they were all about 100 to 150 feet up from the river. And they traced the time to when they were found.
Okay.
And it was during the salmon run. So it was just like any other hunter going out in deer season or whatever. It's like, hey, the salmon's running. Let's go down to the 5 fingers there and eat salmon. And so when they get ready to make a bed, half hour before sundown or whatever, they go pull a bunch of huckleberry vines and they were making nests, but it was always on the western edge of these fingers and about 150 feet from the river. And so
that shows forethought and planning.
Yeah, and it shows repetition.
Yeah.
Why the western edge of the finger? I don't know.
Probably because of the way the sun rises.
Who knows? But that's the pattern that it was, planned and programmed, and 100 feet up, 150 feet up, or yards or whatever it was.
Incredible.
So
that's incredible.
Yeah. So there you go. So, okay. So Skinwalker, and all the electronic stuff completely scrubbed, no evidence. So all they had was their own, this is what I saw.
Right.
And that's becoming more and more a thing, is that they have the ability to jam electronic equipment, I'll call it, which is something I've kind of thought about, is like, well, how come nobody has ever captured one of these things on one of those, hunting cameras? I forgot what they call them. Trail cams.
Well, trail cam. See, I've heard this before from other people that are researchers, is that they genuinely believe that the reason why we haven't had very many good images, we have very few clear images, is because they have the ability to affect electronic devices.
Yep.
Amongst other talents, that's just one talent that they have, that their ability to do that, which makes perfect sense. That would explain a lot.
Well, I believe, personally, just my own personal belief, these trail cameras work off of infrared. So they're broadcasting an infrared light. I think they can see the light.
Probably.
I think they can see the infrared spectrum, and they see the camera's light shining, and they go, oh, okay, well, I ain't going to step in front of that thing.
Right. Right.
So just avoid it,
Right. Sure.
And so anyway, moving on. So that was very interesting. Next speaker was Barb Shoup. And she believes, and she has some evidence, it was not a lot, but it was kind of compelling, that they have the ability to cloak themselves, like Klingon Battleship in Star Trek, or the Predator, that they have the ability to cloak.
Yes.
And she has a film where she believes that she saw a Bigfoot face as she was, sweeping, because she thought there was one there looking or whatever.
Right.
And then she took it down to frame by frame by frame. And she has 3 frames. One where you see the image of the face. The very next frame, you see the face pixelated, like camouflage, like the Predator.
Okay.
And in the next frame, you see it move.
Wow.
As the pixelated, face moving.
God, I bet that's amazing.
Yeah, and there was there was one person, I don't know if this was her or not, but they actually had one cloak in front of them, where they had a Bigfoot. It was standing behind a bush, so there was only this up. And when they realized that they had been seen, actually cloaked in front of them, just disappeared. Not move, but just
right.
Like somebody just pulled a screen in front of them or something. So anyway, so her big thing is that might have the ability to cloak. She also reinforced something that I had talked about from, I think, our last session about the Bigfoots and the Sasquatches, where when they tend to put fingerprints and paw prints on cars and stuff,
right,
that it leaves a greasy film.
right.
And she has experienced that as well. And she said that the finger was between 1.5 and 2 inches wide, each fingerprint.
That's
2
incredible.
inches wide. I mean,
Right.
you're talking that's, 2 of my fingers.
Right. That's
Each
huge.
finger was as wide as 2 of mine.
Right.
And that it left a greasy film. So that kind of reinforced what I had been hearing here locally as well. She also reports having the ability to manipulate audio and video.
Right.
So she's one of those believers. And she was talking about how animals have eye shine. How
Yes.
you shine a light on a deer or a dog or a cat or whatever, and they have the eye shine.
Right.
What that is it's a reflective material at the back of the eye that's shining the light back at you.
Okay.
She says Bigfoot's different. It's not eye shine, but they have the ability to their eyes illuminate. And that's how she called it. She says she has their eyes illuminate, not shine. So they are actually have the ability to create light.
Interesting.
So that's what I'm saying. They may have visual spectrums way beyond ours.
Right.
So anyway, I found that quite fascinating.
That's incredible.
Here's something that really surprised me and kind of made me a little uneasy.
What's that?
David Ellis from the Olympic Project, these folks I showed earlier.
Okay. This
is when I found out that there is some feuding going on amongst Bigfoot investigators and stuff because he really slammed David Pallades. Because David Pallades had mentioned that he was scheduled to go to a Bigfoot conference down south where you guys are last year, I guess. But he had received some threats and said, you come down here preaching all that UFO woo-woo-woo stuff and, we're going to kick your butt or whatever. And so he pulled out and he mentioned it at the conference. And then these guys really got after him and said, yeah, you pulled out of the conference of your own free will. It wasn't because anybody else. And I mean, he railed on him. And I was like, ooh.
That's strange.
There's like anywhere else or any big club, I guess you're going to have a conflict of personalities. And that was something I was not expecting to see at a conference.
I'm shocked. I'm very puzzled by that.
Yeah.
Because my experience with the supernatural community has been extremely accommodating and extremely welcoming and a lot of openness and willing and to listen to other ideas. So I'm very puzzled that anybody would be so determined of their own opinion when they don't know for sure.
Yeah, and they don't agree. But that was
right. If you don't agree, that's okay. You don't agree, so what? You don't agree.
That really shocked me. I was like taken aback. I just didn't mention that because of how surprised I was.
I'm very puzzled by that.
But people are people, and some people are closed-minded, and they're like, this is what I believe, And then you got the other ones that say, hey, man, I'm just taking in all the evidence,
right?
That was a surprise. So I'm just going to mention that just because it was.
Well, and I'm sorry, but there's too much information that crosses over in the paranormal. There's too much to just turn a blind eye and say, oh, no, it can only be one way. I don't know that that's right to do that. I think it's not smart to not keep an open mind, even if it seems completely impossible. I mean, the idea that these things are so different from humans is hard enough to swallow. We struggle with things outside of our familiarity. We get very uncomfortable with things that we don't understand. But I would think that someone who's open to the whole thing should be, well, we don't know what the origin is of that, and we don't know what possible connections there might be. And that's surprising. I'm very surprised by that.
You don't know what you don't know. You know,
Precisely.
you
Yeah.
don't know what you don't know. But anyway, the big headliner was Jeff Meldrum. Now,
Okay.
is that a name familiar with? He's been on a lot of Bigfoot TV shows and stuff like that.
As again, I'm not great with names, but
Yeah.
it does sound a little familiar to me. So he's probably been on a few shows that I've seen.
Yeah, I would consider him probably the foremost researcher, collector of evidence, expert in Bigfoot. I mean,
Okay.
he is Idaho State University anthropologist, specializing in anabolic analysis and locomotion anatomy
Okay.
of humans and primates. And he has probably one of the largest collections of Bigfoot prints
Oh, okay.
that he's either taken personally or people have sent to him.
Okay.
He has the remnants of the Patterson Gimlin prints and film.
Nice.
The original film has been, I guess, compromised or destroyed.
Okay.
But back in the 60s, there was a couple of copies that were made and sent to various places or whatever.
Right.
He has one of the original copies of the
Okay.
original. Okay.
Interesting.
After that, a lot of that stuff was put on videotape.
Mm-hmm.
And then copies were made of copies of made of copies. And, it's like a fax machine or a
Right.
copy machine. If you keep making copies from a copy, it gets degraded over time.
Of course. Right.
And then what happens is lately with computer technology, the way that it is, you have computers interpreting based on these degraded copies.
Right.
So they're filling in blanks.
Right.
The computer's filling in blanks based upon not original material.
Okay.
Okay. And so that makes it a little bit more difficult. Jeff has one of probably the best copy that's on the earth left.
Okay.
Because it's a copy from the originals.
Okay.
And he spent a lot of money and worked with technology to. Have you seen the Gimlin Patterson film?
Yes. Yes.
From 1967.
Yes.
Well, it's real shaky because
Yes.
he's running with a camera and over rocks and
Oh,
whatever,
yeah.
and it's real shaky. Well, they've used computer technology to stabilize it into a homogeneous image.
Okay.
And then he was talking about how. And this is techie stuff, and I don't really. So if I'm off, please don't.
Right. No,
call
we'll
me
have
bad
mercy
names.
on you. It's
Yeah, don't call me bad names. But
right. Gotcha.
If you use some of these enhancing features, again, you're telling the
Right.
computer to guess.
Right.
So they didn't do any of the enhancing portion. What they did was
Okay.
they stabilized it.
Right.
And then they did some sharpening,
Okay.
like your TV,
Right.
where you sharpen and then you contrast and you do
Right.
that type of thing. But they didn't do any computer enhancing, so they didn't
Okay.
alter
Right.
the image in any way. And he presented that at the summit. And let me tell you, the first time I saw that 1967 film, I was probably about 9 or 10 years old. And
Okay.
I knew then that was real.
Yeah.
I was convinced. I said, that is not a man in an ape suit. That is
Right.
not faked. I said,
Right.
that is real. I don't know what it is.
Right.
I can tell you right now, that thing moved right. It looked right.
Yeah.
It was the proportions were just way out of. I just knew it was real. Well, now that
Yeah.
I've seen the film after
Right.
it's been stabilized,
Mm-hmm.
man, I tell you, I don't know how you can't say that is a real thing.
Exactly.
And the other thing that he did, which was fascinating, and I tell you, if you ever get a chance to go to one of these summits and see Jeff Meldrum do his little PowerPoint on his evidence and stuff, it will convince you.
Yeah.
Because what he did is he did a comparison side by side
Okay.
of human beings, apes, and Bigfoots. He
Right.
talks about their anatomy. He talks about their construction. He talks about their musculature.
Right.
And he takes like film, like the neatest one that he did is he put a bodybuilder,
Mm-hmm.
he put a gorilla,
Okay.
put the photograph of the Bigfoot from the Gimlin film,
Right.
all side by side, so that you have apples to apples image of
Sure.
their anatomy,
Right.
and their musculature. And, they're using this big old bodybuilder where you can see every muscle, right? And comparing their back muscles and say, well, this is a human being, and it's
Right.
this big, and then here's a gorilla, which goes, like this big. And he was basically talking about the latissimus dorsi
Okay.
back muscles. And then, here's the Bigfoot, and showing not only they're completely different.
Right.
All three of them are completely different.
Right.
And the legs and the structure of and he was talking about the foot and why their foot looks the way it does in footprints.
Right.
Here's something fascinating that I didn't know. Do you know, like, when a human being puts a footprint in the sand, you have a big cutout in the footprint because that's where the arch is, right?
Right.
Okay, so you take a Bigfoot footprint, and it has this big ridge in the middle, right?
Okay.
Call it, the ridge. The reason that is there is not because their foot has a big old arch that goes across the foot,
Okay.
which is what I always thought.
Right.
I thought, okay, well, you look at our foot and our arch is only, halfway across.
Sure.
And the Bigfoot, they got a big wide foot and a big old wide heel, and their arch goes all the way across.
Right.
Because that's what all the footprints show.
Right.
Not the case. It's just the opposite. Their foot is flat. But unlike ours, that, let's see, like this is the flat part of my foot, and it attaches at the ankle, and our foot flexes like this.
Right.
So just where the toes are and the ball of the feet.
Right.
Bigfoot articulates at the middle. So when he flexes, his whole half of his foot. And so that ridge is caused by the toes and the front half of the foot flexing. And when it does, it pushes the sand, dirt, mud material, pushes it up.
Oh, sure.
So that when you cast it, it has this big ridge.
Interesting.
They call it a medial ridge, right?
Okay.
It's a ridge in the middle of the foot.
That makes sense.
And it's not because they have an arch. It's because the front foot pushes the dirt material back as they step.
That's interesting.
And I was like, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. So anyway, I'm not going to, go on and on and on about a lot of that stuff. Just touching base on what each of these people.
But it's interesting. About. It's interesting.
I did buy Jeff Meldrum's book, and I'm going to hold it up here. Sasquatch Legends Meet Science.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he goes into like the whole history of Bigfoot sightings.
Nice.
People that investigate, but it's all done as a scientist. Okay.
Nice.
And much like Pallades, he comes from the side of I'm a scientist,
right?
And I believe in proof. I collect evidence. I present evidence. Even circumstantial evidence has a place.
Yes, of course.
It's still evidence.
Right.
But it's not proof.
Right.
So he will not say, I believe in Bigfoot. But yeah. And that burns a lot of people. But
honestly, I mean, you've collected so much information, and I think just with the chats that you've attended and listening to all these professional speakers, there's a huge community out there that is vibrantly aware that there's something that we don't understand completely that we're learning about every year. We learn more things.
Well, that's
it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's why I'm excited to get this to you and get this out there. Because I've learned a lot of stuff that I had never knew, or I had no idea how broad this was.
Right. Me either. I mean,
And,
it's fascinating. It
yeah,
is.
and the more I learn, and I'm learning a lot. Here's another thing I didn't even touch on, but with the huckleberry bows, a lot of people that go missing, a lot of Bigfoot sightings, a lot of Bigfoot encounters, all happen around wild huckleberries.
Interesting.
Apparently, huckleberries are a favorite of Bigfoot. They like to eat them. They like to make their beds out of them. And a lot of people go missing, according to the 411 of David Pilates,
Mm-hmm.
around huckleberries. It's a very common feature.
That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So if you go huckleberry hunting,
Don't go alone.
don't go alone.
Right.
Absolutely don't go alone.
Right.
And also be very, very careful.
Yeah.
Also, the casino, the girls that I was flirting with there that gave me the shirt,
Mm-hmm.
they are going to be having a UFO paranormal summit in
Nice.
this year again. And I actually might be attending this. So I might be having a report for you on the UFO summit
Nice.
later
And
on.
that's in May?
Yeah, it's going to be in May. This one's the old one. This is the
Okay.
old one for 2024.
Oh, okay.
But they are having it again in May. I
Okay.
just saw the flyer for it that the girls were telling me about. So
All
I
right.
may be attending because it's only 7 miles down the road.
Well, how could you miss that?
Yeah.
It's too close not to.
Yeah. So
Well, gosh, Jay, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for all of your field work. I mean,
Yeah.
I could not attend all of these things and get all this information by myself. So I appreciate your effort and time and your investment because
well, hey, I'm glad to help out.
it's fun to share this stuff because I know there's people that are curious about Bigfoot, but they wouldn't pull the trigger on going to an event just yet because they're just not sure. So the more we can share and keep the conversation going, I think the better everyone else will be just to hear it all.
Well,
We
yeah,
need to
you
hear
don't want
stuff
to
that we
feel
don't
like a
know.
weirdo, what's the Bigfoot? Oh, you're one of those. Okay. At least I had the cover of the podcast to say, hey,
Right.
I'm here as a reporter. I'm not
Right.
because of, you guys, Bigfoot. I'm just here to, observe and report.
Right. Exactly.
But even speaking with people at the conference, I mean, there was a Native Indian kid, Native American kid during one of the breaks, and I was wandering around the vendor booths and stuff, and he was telling me about an incident his mom had.
Oh yeah.
And strangely enough, it was on Highway 109, right there by
Right.
Hoquiam.
Right.
There's a section, I call it the Dark Forest and the Twisties, where it's
Mhm.
real winding road. It's only maybe a mile or two long,
Right.
but it's in where the forest has grown up over, and it's always dark in there. It's very, very dark,
Okay.
very, very wooded. And it's just as you're leaving Hoquiam, the town of Hoquiam, heading over here to Ocean Shores. And he was telling me his mom saw one cross the road right in front of her right there. And I was like,
wow.
that's like right at the edge of town.
Wow.
I mean, there's houses up that road and stuff. And
That's
he's
surprising.
he's
That's
like,
surprising.
yeah. And he says, my mom, well, she told me, but after she told me, she said she'll never mention it ever again. It affected her. Oh, and I want to mention something else. What
What's
nobody
that?
ever talks about is when I was talking with Scott Taylor, he was telling me about how after people have had an experience, a sighting,
Mhm.
a personal sighting, how so many of them actually develop PTSD over the event.
Yes.
Guys like me who've never had an experience like that would think, oh, I would think that would be wonderful and marvelous, and how wonderful, fortunate few to have seen something like that. But that's not always the case. A lot of the people are affected so deeply that they are
Yeah.
actually traumatized by it.
Yeah. And I can say the part of the reason why I believe from my own experience is that uh, there's something very unsettling about seeing an animal that is gigantic, that seems humanoid, We don't know of anything else like us.
Mhm.
And to see something, I've described it many times. It's like, what would you do if you saw a unicorn?
Mhm.
Your brain doesn't accept it because it's not part of your reality. And so having something make noise and be animated and alive in front of you, you can't deny it. It's undeniable fact. It's in front of your face. In my case, I could smell it, hear it, and see it. There was no denying what I saw. But it was very unsettling that something that big was in the same world as I'm in, because as far as I know, that's not real. And here it is, very real in my face. So the PTSD, I totally get. I totally get that. Because
Yeah, much like the shows you've done on the ferries and stuff.
Yes.
Very, very similar.
Yep.
Uh,
Exactly.
you have the deniers. They got them broken down into categories. You have the people that are deniers. No such
Right.
thing. It's all imagination. You're making it up. It can't exist.
Right.
It doesn't exist because it can't exist. You get the
Right.
scientists and stuff that say that. So you have the deniers.
Right.
Then you have the people who are experiencers,
Right.
and they call themselves knowers.
Yeah.
I know,
Right.
and that's it. I know.
Right.
And then you have the skeptics. Well, I don't believe because there is no proof.
Well,
So
and those are people, if they'd seen it, then they would believe.
right. I'll believe it when I see it. So
Right. And I get that. I do respect that. I understand that.
yeah, I get
Yeah.
that too. I've been that way, a lot of my life and stuff. But then you have guys like me who are, I call them the curiousers. It's not that I don't believe. It's not that I do believe. I've seen
Right.
enough evidence to believe that they're real,
Right.
but I'm just really curious about them.
Yeah.
You have all these different abilities that they seem to display, and I'm just touching. There's orbs. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many people that have seen a
Right.
Bigfoot either appear or disappear when orbs are near, and I'm not
Right.
talking about little.
That's a whole nother subject.
Yeah,
I know it.
your pictures and stuff, and there's an orb in
Right.
the room or something, or a bug
Right.
goes across the family and leaves a trail or something. I'm not talking that. I'm talking like self-illuminating orbs in the
Right.
forest. Will-o-wisps and whatnot.
Gotcha.
Appearing and disappearing with orbs. I'm not talking about other things I keep hearing more and more often, and that is the scent.
Yes.
Sometimes they scent, sometimes they don't.
I've
Sometimes
heard
they
that.
reek,
I've heard that too. Yeah.
and just like they may have the ability to actually create these scents at will.
Right.
And especially with the females. Now I'm finding out that this is also well known around here.
Right.
Is that if a female Bigfoot is around, you'll often smell roses.
Interesting.
Huh. There's no rose fields around here, especially in the winter and the rain.
Right. Right.
And it'll just be this overwhelming sense of a scent of roses.
Yeah.
When they suspect that the females are around, and the mundane answer to that is that just like all other women, they like to smell good and they like to smell like roses.
Sure.
So, but there's so many of these things that aspects that I'm learning, and like
Right.
I say, we just
Well, we could go on and on and on, but
Right.
honestly, there's a lot to cover, and we could definitely talk about this some more in another time. But
yeah,
I appreciate your time with this, Jay. This has been really interesting, and I'm glad that we got to do all this catch up, because you've been doing a lot of stuff, and it's awesome. It's
I had a
great.
lot of notes to go through. I tell you, it's
I bet.
be good to get rid of these things and get all the information out into the world. Yeah.
There we go. That's awesome. Well, this is Holly from Holly's Pandorium, and I just want to say thanks again to our guest, Jay Cobb, today for doing our reporting from out of town, because there's a lot to report, you guys. I'm just saying there's a lot. And I just want to say thank you to all of our listeners and followers, and please hit the like button. Please take a second. It takes 2 seconds. Hit the like and the subscribe. and it makes a huge difference for the channel. So I appreciate it when you do that. This is Holly from Holly's Pandorium, and Jay saying thanks for stopping in. We'll see you again soon.
It was fun. Thanks.